Before we get started, wanted to just kind of preface the fact that, if you didn't know, I did mention this, previously that I was supposed to give a 2-hour workshop at the B2B Sales and Marketing Exchange in Boston a couple of weeks ago. I was sitting in the airport 20 minutes before my flight was supposed to board and got a notification that my flight was canceled. So unfortunately, the earliest flight out of Minneapolis the next morning wouldn't have gotten me to Boston until after my presentation was already supposed to be done. So we are cramming 2 hours worth of workshop materials into a 1 hour webinar. So I'm going to go very fast, and I'm not going to say furious, but we're going to cover a lot of information here. And so if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the question, the kind of the Q&A, versus the chat, and I will get to any questions that we're going to cover. So just getting started here, like I mentioned, my name is Wes Lieser, Vice President of Recruiting for Demand Generation and Marketing Technology. A little bit about me, just a couple of kind of pictures. I have a 1-year-old son. I live in Minnesota. Everybody has a cabin up north. A picture of my 2 dogs, and then it was my wife and I. That was just a picture from our 10-year wedding anniversary that we just recently celebrated. So just a little bit of background about me personally, and now professionally, when I get this slide to go over. So I'm work for a company called Verseek Search and Consulting. We're actually one of the largest privately held search firms in the Midwest. When I started recruiting for demand generation, it's actually about 8.5 years ago now. The company thought I was crazy. Nobody knew really what demand generation was. I can kind of get into my background a little bit, but I started from scratch. It was just me based out of Minneapolis, and I started working for B2B software companies all across the country. Now we have a 5-person team focused on demand generation. It used to be just kind of like marketing automation, marketing operations, and now that turns into sales operations, revenue operations, all digital roles, product marketing, so on and so forth. We work with a lot of, primarily B2B tech companies, in that $10 to $100 million range. Now, have we worked for, $1 billion plus companies as clients? Absolutely. And then our clients are used to be national. We've gone global now. So what we're going to cover, an overview of the job market right now. The number one question my team and I get is just, hey, what are you hearing? What's going on? So we're going to cover that, how to attract and retain the best people, what are candidates looking for in an organization and a manager, how to run an efficient hiring process. And we got some kind of questions to poll the audience about that as well. How to work with your internal HR team. Hey, not everybody can go external and use a specialized recruiter. So how do we make sure that we best utilize the teams that we do have internally? And then we're going to get into other things. A lot of it as far as how to build a team. And the other part of it is how to make sure that you're standing out and you're able to attract the best people. So negotiating compensation, optimizing LinkedIn, and what a good resume looks like. Okay, so a little bit of the job market overview here. So no secret, COVID. So if we rewind the clock to January 2020, national unemployment rate is under 4%. The economy was great. Everything was, clicking on all cylinders. And then a couple months later, it was actually a couple of days after we had gotten back from our President's Club trip here at Verseek, and the country shuts down. International travel is closed. Everybody, gets the kind of work from home orders, and within 60 days, unemployment spikes to 11% nationally. So if you go from 4%, it more than doubled, almost tripled in that time. So definitely a lot of people were just, what's going on? What happened then over the course of the next year is, and I can just tell you the story from a recruitment standpoint, is we started getting into like July and August, and companies were redoing budgets. They're realizing, okay, well, we're not making as much money right now, but we're not spending as much money either, and we actually have more budget available than we had thought. No travel. A lot of companies were renegotiating leases on office space and stuff like that, and so they reallocated a lot of that money into growing the business, and let's capitalize and let's increase our market share. And so spending increased exponentially, and that really led us to kind of post-election. And then 2021 was just an all-out hiring spree. As everybody knows, salaries increased exponentially. May 2021, unemployment was at lower than it was in January of 2020. And then a year later, earlier this year, unemployment was 2%. Now, where we're at now is it's almost doubled, and it's at 3.6% now, but that's still lower than where we were previously. So most people, talk about the pending, recession, excuse me, and unemployment's still lower than where it was before. Right now, it's obviously almost doubled over the course of the last couple of months, which has a lot of people kind of questioning what's going on. But we're still in a pretty good spot overall. And versus using the term recession, I just like to use the term regression. We're more so regressing towards the mean. And so, really, this has been very looming. COVID, what happened was, stock market was in a really great spot. The United States had been losing baby boomers. It was something to the extent of like 10,000 baby boomers per day were retiring. And that just, COVID just caused a lot more of those baby boomers, to retire. Plus, families aren't having 5, 6, 7 kids. It's, 2, maybe 3, sometimes 1. And so we're not producing as many kids. So, we just don't have as many able-bodied workers in the workforce. In addition to labor force participation is at an all-time low. So even right now, when people talk about the pending recession and stuff like that, there are still almost twice as many open positions in the United States as there are people to fill those positions, right? Now, the biggest question I'm sure you're going to ask yourself, and everybody does, is like, well, what industry is that? Is that, hourly workers versus salary worker? And so, this is from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So it is going to be all into, kind of everybody all together. So I think it's less about, what industry, what range of positions are these, VP, manager, director level. And I think we can just kind of use it across the board to say, hey, these are just leading indicators that we can use to determine kind of the state of our economic situation. Okay. In addition to that, our job burnout is at an all-time high. Okay. So if you look at this graph specifically in women, and when that comes to more women are working in the workforce now than they ever have before, right? Women are also being required to have kids, take care of the kids, right? And so there's a big discrepancy versus paid labor and unpaid labor. And I'll be the first one to say, I think women are feeling it a lot more than men. And you can see that in this graph, from a burnout rate. Not only do they have to be on all day, at the office, but then they come home and they're expected to be the primary caregiver for their children, as well. Okay. Again, I think I mentioned earlier, I showed the slide. I have a 1-year-old. This is very relevant for my spouse and I, and how we've been handling things. And one thing that was really very helpful for us was a book called Fair Play. It's a New York Times best-selling book. I won't get into too many details. That's not why we're here, but just if you're feeling the burnout in your home, this is definitely a really great resource to check out. Again, it was very helpful for my spouse and I on how to kind of divide the labor, so to speak, both in the house and outside of it. Okay, so it's just a little bit of an overview about the job market in general. So I'll just kind of stop there. Any questions that people have, kind of throw it up. I was just kind of barreling through that. And so I'll try to get I'll try to get to your questions as soon as I can. Sometimes I kind of get into a mode and start going. So I don't see any questions coming through right now. So I'll just keep powering through here. So how do we attract the best people? So this is one of those things where we put out a poll, and I am going to put a poll up for people to, and this is what candidates are looking for, okay? And there's a list of 5 things, what you feel candidates are looking for. And if you could rank these in what you feel are order of importance, right? So to be valued, make a difference, company reputation, work-life balance, compensation, company culture. Okay. So if you can just kind of go through and, put what you feel, kind of rank them in order. Hopefully I did the poll right. I've never done kind of like the multiple choice ranked ones. So hopefully we're in a good spot here. So if you could take just a minute here and we can kind of go through that. Q&A. Great question. One being, one is most important, and then 5 is least important. Sorry for not clarifying that. That's a great question. My fault. Right. Sorry, I gotta move this, get back to the poll. Company reputation. Okay, we're seeing a bunch of stuff kind of come in. For the poll, I won't give it too much time. Well, I'll just go through, and as people are answering, I'll kind of go through here and what people are actually looking for. Oh, I gotta exit the poll here. Sorry, user error. I gotta end the poll in order to go. All right. Okay, so we'll share the results here. What are candidates looking for? To be valued, make a difference. I can't read the results on this, so we'll get back to you on that. But like I said, the first multiple choice one that I did. So what candidates are looking for? To be valued, make a difference. Number 1. I don't think that's a really big shocker. Number 2, company reputation. I don't know how many of you had that, but gold star if you did. That was not one that I expected to be number 2. Number 3, work-life balance. Number 4, fair and realistic compensation. And number 5 is an enjoyable and collaborative culture. So to be valued, make a difference in the company that they're working for. Again, it all makes sense, but when you have to look at these 5 things and then rank them in order of importance, it was just something that we pulled several hundred individuals across all of our different practice areas, and it's just kind of surprising to see some of the stuff come back. And so that's what candidates are looking for. The problem is this is how we talk to candidates. So imagine putting together a job description, just like you put together a food menu, and you're trying to get people to come eat at your restaurant. And you're saying, hey, you're going to read from the menu and you're going to select these items for consuming, and you're going to eat your meal in a reasonable amount of time, and you're going to pay the bill, and you need to come here and you have to have a friendly attitude and appreciation towards the staff. And I mean, imagine if a restaurant did this. They would get laughed off the planet. They would not be in business for very long. Yet this is how we write job descriptions. Okay, it's a very backward mentality. Is a, hey, yeah, here's a position, and I get it. 10, 20, work was different, and when you had a job, corporate America was different, and now it's really about inviting people and why somebody should work for you versus why you're the best place for people to work. So just a couple of different things when it comes to how we write job descriptions. Okay. A couple of things I just highlighted here, and I'll just kind of go through. These are both $85,000 positions. Okay. So on the one on the left that you're going to see is, honestly, I feel like somebody took a director of demand generation or like a, head of marketing position and kind of took all the buzzwords and slapped it up on an email marketing specialist JD. Like if you're hiring for a junior level position and you have a 2-page job description, that should scare you. That is a lot of work. Hopefully you're not hiring somebody for an $80,000 to $85,000, 2 to 4, maybe 5-year marketing position, and having an in-depth job description like that versus the one on the right talking about the company and the growth potential in the organization. I mean, yes, what they're going to be doing, but talk about more things that's going to have them, kind of be appealing, when it comes to, where they're going to start, but where they're going to end up. being most important. So I did get the poll results here. By the way, I have Nick and Angela helping me out on the back end. Thank you to both Nick and Angela. And so the results, number one was compensation. The number one voted was compensation. Number two was value to make a difference. Number three was the collaborative environment. Number four, work-life balance, and number five, company reputation. So the votes on our webinar here, company reputation was number five, and then the poll that we had sent out for Verseek, company reputation was number two. So definitely, I think you were as surprised as I was on that one. So hopefully this makes sense in how we talk to candidates and how we attract candidates. A big part of that is in the job description and how we write our job descriptions to get people interested in those positions. Okay. So when you're talking with candidates, just a couple of things. How do we identify top talent? Number one, why are they looking for an opportunity? So what I mean by that is oftentimes you can discern whether or not somebody is running away versus running towards, right? It's easy to say that, hey, we definitely want people that are, running towards something versus running away. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody can't be coming from a bad situation. We're actually coming across a lot of that right now. As we mentioned, over the course of the last, 6, 8, 12 months, salaries have increased exponentially, right? When somebody's offering you 20, 30, sometimes $40,000 more than what you're making right now, it's a little bit easier to maybe miss some interview questions that you would have asked previously, or you can maybe turn a blind eye to a couple of the product issues. Oh, you know what? The product isn't that bad because I'm going to be making this, much more money. Or, ooh, you know what? The sales leader isn't that bad because I'm making a lot more money. However, you get into the organization and then you realize, oh, wow, okay, yes, I'm making money, but this product isn't as great as I thought it was going to be. Or, gosh, you know what? The sales leader or my hiring manager isn't everything I thought they would be. Then it's okay to be running away from something. But if somebody's constantly running away from something, that obviously should be a red flag. What we find is, especially in the realm of demand generation, what I call revenue producing marketers, very process and operationally driven, the best marketers know their metrics. I mean, similar to how a sales individual is going to know their percentage to goal, where they were to quota, did they make President's Club, where they were in performance with the rest of their peers, marketers should know the same thing, right? So when you're talking about sales cycle and, oh, hey, we decreased the, average sales cycle from, 7 weeks to 5 weeks. And, here are the key campaign performance indicators that helped us expedite that. I mean, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, really great marketers are going to have a general understanding of their performance metrics. This goes back into kind of number one, understand job hoppers. There are certain organizations and individuals that completely, disregard and, hey, if you've gone the, 8 months, 6 months, 12 months, oh gosh, you know what? You've had 3 jobs in 2.5, 3 years. I'm not even going to look at you. It's definitely something to monitor, but I don't believe in completely discrediting and discounting those individuals, right? Take a moment to just kind of stop and understand, like, why is this individual, making the moves that they've made, and really kind of understand why they're doing that. And then, one of the things too is as far as like interview questions, right? A lot of people ask leading interview questions. And I'm always for open-ended interview questions. So a leading interview question would be, have you ever worked with Marketo? Or have you ever worked with HubSpot? They'll say, oh yeah, I've worked with Marketo or HubSpot or so on and so forth, versus help me understand the tools that you worked with previously. Right? So leave it a little bit more open-ended, so those individuals can tell you, because people talk about stuff that they know about, right? So if you say, hey, have you ever used Marketo? Oh yeah, I've used Marketo. Well, that might have been the, 3 of 3, automation tools that they've used, right? Because they've used, other tools, Pardot or HubSpot, more readily. But yeah, they've used Marketo. That's what you asked them. They answered the question, right? Versus just really understanding the the tools that they've worked with. So just make sure to ask more open-ended questions during the interview, because again, people, when they're passionate, they talk about things that they know about first, and it'll just give you a better indication of the actual tools that they've worked with. Um, all right. So employee retention. So when we're talking with our individuals, and a little bit of this, I'm just going to kind of go through so I can see if you want to write down all of these things. When we're talking with individuals, and I didn't put out uh, a a poll or a survey that asked individuals these. What I did is I just talked to my team. And hey, if we're talking to individuals, like, what are some of the big reasons that people are looking to move and leave their current company, right? And number one is they feel stuck. And what happens is a lot of organizations, as they're growing, might not necessarily be a way for them to, move up the organization, climb the corporate ladder. Because if they're a senior manager and they're looking for a director, position, well, there's already a director at the organization. So the only way they can move up is if somebody else moves out. Right. So what's something that you can do to be able to kind of, supplement that? And that's provide training and resources, get them involved in the process. And that goes into the next point, which is whiteboard and strategize. When people come back and they say, gosh, you know what, I just really feel like I've learned everything that I could here. There's no room for me to grow. Providing, your employees with resources, and then bringing them along the ride and helping them, and having them be in the rooms and hearing their opinion, and getting them involved in strategy. It really just kind of keeps the juices going, and it gets everybody, they can just exercise kind of that strategy muscle that they might be wanting to. Right. And then you can just get a better understanding of, well, could this individual, move into a higher position as well? This was a huge one during COVID. Companies not backfilling fast enough because the work doesn't go away. It's like, oh, hey, you know what? Our, marketing ops specialist just left. There's still the same amount of work, but I'm just doing the work of two people now versus one, because we can't find somebody to backfill this position. That causes massive burnout, and it's a very quick way to lose an entire team. Once one person starts leaving, if that position isn't backfilled quickly enough, it's a quick way to kind of lose other people. And then internal support systems, kind of that mentorship program. Have somebody attached to somebody else in the organization to make sure that they're getting everything, attach a newer person with a more seasoned hire. So they're, again, getting acquainted into the organization. Company or individuals now, especially when you're going remote, people don't feel as connected, right? People love the flexibility that working remotely allows them to have, but they don't have that connectivity that you do if you're in the office. Proactively compensate, that goes back into the backfilling. Hey, you know what, if somebody has been, if you are having a hard time, backfilling a junior level position, and you are a more senior level role, and somebody's kind of picking up the slack, going to bat for them, trying to get them a bonus, or some sort of a, hey, here's a gift card, or just doing something that you show general appreciation, because they're picking up the slack. And then here's the other thing. This used to be best marketers. If you don't think that other recruiters are reaching out to your best marketers now, even still now, recruiters are just reaching out to everybody. So just know that people on your team are getting messaged by recruiters. Okay, everybody is. And so look at your team and say, okay, who can I lose? Who can I not afford to lose? And make sure that you focus some time and attention on that. And one of those things, this next slide is going to go into a little bit about the kind of building internal internal stakeholders. And when individuals feel supported in the organization, they have a much higher likelihood to stay with the organization than if they don't. Okay. And so this was just a really I think we can say, hey, have everybody get connected and build internal teams and create connectivity. And you're like, oh yeah, great. That all sounds great in theory. But this slide just really shows that it's very important to making sure that you're retaining your best people. And then when you retain best people, they want to invite other top performers to come work with them as well. So how to avoid a bad hire? I'll be the first one to admit, happens to everybody. But there are some things that you can do to try and protect yourself. Chasing a ghost is a concept that I don't want to say coined a while ago, but talking to an individual and it starts. So let's say they were at a company for 7 years or 5 years. Okay. And then after that 5 year stint or 7 year stint, they go to another company for 6 months and it didn't really work out. And then they go to another company for a year and then that didn't really work out. And then they go to another company for, 4 months and they're talking to me. And it's like, well, okay, well, you had a really good stint here, a couple of short stints after, like, help me understand, like, what are you looking for? They go, well, what I'm looking for is really what I had back at this, company that they were at for 5 years. And I have to tell them, like, you're never going to get that again. You're never going to get that company again. You're never going to get those same people. They are literally chasing a ghost. And so that's something to where when you're asking somebody what they're looking for in their next opportunity, and they continue to keep comparing it to something that they've had in the past, I'm not going to say to not hire that person, but you have to make sure that you let them know that this is not that. And we have our own, good, pros and cons, at our organization. Understanding employment gaps is a really big one. I think, and again, it's more so to, when somebody was we'll get into this in a little bit, but if they took some time off and they were, consulting, were they really consulting with clients, or were they just, using the consulting to, kind of bridge the gap and try to fill in some employment gaps, right? The little things, this is misspellings on a resume, formatting errors on a resume, following up with thank you notes. I know these sound, old school and very tedious things. I'm telling you, there's nothing more leading from an indication standpoint on somebody's interest in the organization is communication and how they communicate, how they present themselves, right? I'm not saying if somebody, has a period in the wrong spot on a resume that you shouldn't hire them. That's not what I'm saying. But it's the little things matter a lot. Somebody that brings a resume, follow-up notes, grammar, stuff like that. Yes, candidates scare me a ton. Hey, have you done this? Yes. Can you do this? Yes. And it's less about them interviewing and more, it's almost like they're telling you what they think you want to hear, versus what you need to hear, right? And I'm somebody who, if I get pushback in an interview, I don't look at it as a bad thing. If we have a different opinion, like you want, people with different opinions and mindsets on your team, versus the group think, right? Yes, candidates kind of scare me. I kind of talked about this earlier, the consultants versus the consultants. I think we all, kind of know what that is. And then leaving out any information. Candidates always ask me, well, I was only at this company for, 3 months. It didn't really work out. Do I even put that, stint on my resume? A lot of recruiters, career coaches, people might give you different advice. I'm always the person that says, like, if you have nothing to hide, like, you have nothing to hide. And so it's one of those things where I'm always the proponent of put it on your resume, just talk through it, right? Because again, I work in B2B tech, across the country, globally now, and it's a small world, right? And so, hey, if you're interviewing with somebody and they're like, oh gosh, actually, I remember that person, and oh, so and so worked at the same company together, but then it's not on your resume. They're like, wait a second, we actually know that you worked here. Why? And then they think you're hiding something, right? So I'm always a big proponent, again, of just kind of putting it on your resume, if you have nothing to hide. Okay. So I'll stop there, kind of check the questions. Sorry, I was going, and we got a lot more stuff to cover. So I'll continue to kind of really just grind through this as well. No questions are coming in. So running an efficient hiring process. So a couple of questions. So I got a poll that I'm going to put out, and hopefully it's not as problematic as it was last time. Polls, questions. Oh, I was sharing that the whole time. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so hiring process. How would you rate your hiring process of your current organization? Hopefully that's coming through. Great. 10 out of 10. Just kind of seeing some things come through a little bit here. Give it another few seconds for the poll. Everybody, so great, 10 out of 10. Meh, not really sure, could be better. And then what hiring process? We got a couple of what hiring processes. So I will end the poll, share the results, and hey, great, 10 out of 10. Maybe you can give me advice on what the hiring process should be. We got a few people as far as what hiring process. So this is one of those things where, when we talk about hiring process, and then there was one more poll that I have in here as well. Okay, no, that was actually supposed to be first. So we're good to go on that. So one of the things as far as the hiring process, how to run an efficient hiring process. My slide isn't coming over. Oh, there we go. Okay, so first kind of thing, and this is whether or not you're working with internal talent acquisition, recruiter, whatever it is, I always say if you have an internal recruiter that's recruiting on behalf of you, their success is kind of that's a depiction of how well you set them up, right? Because you know the position so much better than they do. So it's really about transferring that information, versus just giving them a couple of buzzwords and profiles to kind of look at. And so you need to have a really in-depth meeting with HR talent acquisition to make sure that they really, really understand the role and the nuances of the position, okay? Then that HR individual, does a pre-screen with the candidates. They take okay, here's, we talked to 10 candidates. All right, I'm going to, send you 3 of those candidates. Those 3 candidates have a screen with the hiring manager. Then you get members of the team involved in the interview. A lot of companies will kind of get into, projects and are projects considered free consulting advice and all that kind of stuff that's going on right now as well. Team interview number 2, coffee, lunch, happy hour, depending upon the level, that might not necessarily be applicable, and then the offer. So that's just at a high level. So what does that look like a little bit more in depth and from a time commitment standpoint? Okay. So internal recruiter pre-screen, 30 minutes, hiring manager interview. The one piece of advice I always say is, oh, hey, just give me 30 minutes, with the candidate, right away. And yes, at a high level, 30 minutes sounds like, plenty of time. And if you want to just say, hey, you know what, we'll schedule 30 minutes, because sometimes if you're having a bad interview, 30 minutes can sound like an eternity. But if you're on a good interview, 30 minutes is just way too quick. Right. We all know that. We've all been in a good interview. Next thing you know, you look down at your phone, your watch or whatever, and it's like, oh my gosh, like we have no more time. And then we need to have like another 30-minute conversation that's kind of redundant, kind of not. I always say, hey, set it up for 45 minutes, right? That way you block off your calendar for 45 minutes. So even if you schedule it for 30 minutes or tell the candidate that you're going to go 30 minutes, that gives you a little bit of buffer time, on the back end to keep that good conversation going. I also say, again, depending upon the level, but like a team interview, a group interview, try to keep it at 2 hours. I've talked to so many candidates that, when you go 3, when you go 4 hours, from an interview, like they are so wiped. And right. And then the people that they're meeting last, and oftentimes it's like, hey, there's going to be a 4-hour interview, and the last person that they're going to meet with is the CEO or the CFO or the, VP of HR. That candidate is completely drained. Do you really want them coming off of a 3.5-hour like interview session with XYZ people, and then the last person that they meet with is the most important person, aka the CEO or whatever? So try to keep those interviews at 2 hours. If you're going to do an assignment, give them 3 to 4 days to complete, and make sure that the assignment and that you outline that assignment will not take any more than 2, maybe 3 hours tops, right? If you start getting into the, hey, we lead these projects and you're going to outline a 30, 60, 90-day plan, candidates are starting to just completely get turned off and say, hey, no, that's consulting, people put these plans together for organizations. I'm not going to do that for you. And there's just friction there, and they'll just remove themselves from process. And you can say, well, I'm not really, if that candidate's going to do that, they obviously weren't the right fit anyways. But I think we can start reducing friction by setting realistic expectations and using those projects to more steer the conversation versus we're going to base it, your entire employment at this organization based on a project or a presentation that you're going to give. Another team interview, I kind of look at, who they would be meeting with, some direct reports. Obviously, if we're in marketing, the sales conversation or product conversations are going to be really important. And then, hiring manager, C-level, so on and so forth. So to really summarize, they've met with 6 to 8 people, 6-ish hours of actual time investment. They've been in process for 12 to 24 business days. So 20 business days is 4 weeks. And here's the big thing. They're as interested in you as you are in them, especially throughout COVID. I think companies were throwing up, oh, well, they got a couple of competing offers, and you know what? The candidate is kind of interested, but they got these other things that they're looking at as well. And the company's like, well, let's just increase our offer. It might be a bridge, but it doesn't necessarily set you up for long-term success. And I think a lot of companies are realizing that they threw a lot of money at some individuals that they're no longer at the organization. So purpose of an interview. There's nothing more frustrating, especially as a candidate, than a redundant interview process. Oh, I'm going to talk to this person about my, skill set, and this person about my skill set, and this person about my skill set. You shouldn't have 4 people interview an individual externally, and they all be around well, can this person do the position? Right? So the 4 purposes of an interview: functional skill set, culture, collaboration, and then leadership. And make sure that you have each person that's involved in the interview process. We'll kind of get into this in my next one, that you're coaching them. Hey, this is what I want you to interview for. This is the purpose that every interview has a purpose versus, well, I just want you to meet this person and see if you like them. Okay. Right? Make sure that you have the purpose defined so each person knows that going into the interview. So a couple of huge do's and don'ts. If you have your camera, we're going to be sending out slides after this anyways, but I would recommend, kind of picture, screenshot this one, kind of the key takeaways, do's and don'ts. One big don't that's incredibly frustrating from a recruiting or hiring standpoint is don't start interviewing without knowing the process. Candidates nowadays want to know, okay, how many interviews is it going to be? You might not necessarily have exactly, just because schedules change, people are traveling, availability, stuff like that, but at least know what your interview process is. Don't add steps to the interview process. Say, oh, yep, you're going to meet with these 4 people and it's going to do this. And then, okay, the person's like, after that, we're going to make an offer. It's like, well, actually, we really want you to talk to this person before we make you an offer. Now the candidate's like, wait, why is that? Did I not do something properly? Are you questioning a certain amount of my skills? It adds confusion and frustration to the interview process. We talked about redundant interviews. Do not oversell the opportunity. They're, again, coming out of kind of the last couple of years and talking with candidates now, a lot of candidates were oversold on an opportunity, by a recruiter. Oh gosh, you know what? The company's in way worse financial position than I thought. Or, they told me that I was only going to be doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm also doing A, B, C, D, E, and F. And there's just so many things involved, and they didn't talk about that, and I don't have any resources. They told me I was going to be able to hire 2 people within 3 months. Now I don't have budget to do that for a year. They've cut my event budget and so on and so forth. Definitely, I always say it's like, I want to talk to a candidate about the worst day on the job, right? Because I don't want to just overhype an opportunity, have somebody get really excited. They get in the seat, and then, 3 weeks in, they go, oh, wow, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then you're having to backfill the position in 2 months again because they left. The next don't is sometimes not avoidable, but if you can avoid it, I would highly recommend doing that. And that's having candidates in different stages of the process. And that's simply because, oh, hey, we talked to one person, we love them a lot, but the CEO or the leader is like, well, it's only one person, we got to see more people to make sure that we're getting the best person. Okay, well, now you have this really good person sitting right here that you have to sit on, and they're just waiting. And well, if they're not making a decision, now we think that they're actually not that interested in me. And they're like, well, I thought I was going to get a job and it was going great. And gosh, you know what? Now they're not making me an offer. So they become less interested in you. Okay. Couple of do's: calibrate on candidates early in process. That's kind of a big to do with your internal recruiting team. Have them send you over a couple of profiles. I would say talk to somebody early, just to be, hey, I talked to this person, I like this and this and this. Can you just have a conversation with them to kind of get, hey, am I on the right track, right? Do show enthusiasm to top candidates. So one of the things, we won't have time, but there's a story that I tell. Actually, I will tell it. So Jimmy Johnson, head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, he actually cut a backup linebacker for falling asleep in a film session. Okay. And it was all over the news. I mean, this is, going back 20 years ago. You can Google it. Jimmy Johnson cuts a linebacker. And one of the reporters during a press conference a couple of days later, they said, well, Jimmy, you cut so-and-so backup linebacker. Like, what would you do if Troy Aikman, your star quarterback, fell asleep in a meeting? Jimmy goes, I'd stand up, I'd walk over, I'd tap Troy on the shoulder, and I'd say, you might want to stay awake for this. And the purpose of that is, you can't treat all candidates the same. If you really like a candidate, don't necessarily play it close to the vest, or, oh gosh, you know what? We don't want this candidate to know that we're really interested in them. Nah, that's not the game that we play anymore. It's, you want there to be mutual interest, but you want to make sure that candidates know how interested you are. Do talk about salary early and often. There's nothing more frustrating than you getting to the end of the line and you're 20 grand off on comp, or you didn't realize that somebody had shares vesting and now you got to give them a big signing bonus for them to come along. You want to prep top candidates for interviews. Oh, hey, you know what? The VP of sales does this and this and this. Talk to them about this. Now, you don't want to, again, mislead, but you do want to prep, top candidates for difficult interviews, as well as leadership. I actually had a client, unfortunately, there was a couple of candidates that had to meet with the CEO, and let's just say they didn't go well because the CEO was not prepped to handle some of these top candidates, and the candidates ended up removing themselves. So you want to make sure that you're prepping leadership for interviews with top candidates. Stop there, go through questions. I know I'm talking fast, I apologize, but again, a 2-hour workshop into a 1-hour webinar. I'm just trying to go as quickly as I can to get the information. Okay, so working with internal HR talent acquisition. Again, we've talked about this before: attract but don't oversell, and make sure that you're telling your recruiters that just level with them. Like, don't overhype, don't oversell. When you're talking to your recruiter, give them marketing metrics. Right? Because that's really the juice of what a lot of these candidates are going to be interested in. And so, when a recruiter gets on the phone and like, yep, we got a great culture and we got a, ping pong table, or we do this or we do that. That's a boilerplate. I can find that off of your website. What I can't find is really juicy, like marketing metrics, product timeline, product life cycle, where they're at, sales cycle, what the problem is. I mean, get into kind of specific information that you want your internal recruiting team to know, because that's what gets really good marketers interested. Mutual expectations. Hey, how many roles are you working on right now? I mean, if you have a 4-person internal recruiting team and they're working on 100 positions, that's, hey, okay, great. You have 25 positions that you're working on right now. Where does my role fit in like your priority? Okay. And so just really understand that way. It's like, you're not expecting them to send you, 3 candidates this week, and, they have 25 other positions that they're working on. So you don't see candidates for a month. Right. So just understand, we talked about this, the interest in top candidates. I told the Jimmy Johnson story. And then candidates do need feedback. Again, with they're saying, and I'll say this later on as well, time kills deals. That's kind of a saying in recruiting, is the longer that you have somebody in process, the more kind of nuances and intricacies that can potentially happen that will allow you to lose that person. So get them feedback after an interview within 24 to 48 hours. No news is bad news. That's again kind of a recruiter. If we don't hear anything from a candidate, that's not very good. And candidates think that same thing from a company. Oh gosh, I interviewed there. I didn't hear back from them in however long. They think it's bad news, and they then get disinterested in you, and they start interviewing, with other companies as well. Understand skills versus compensation. So it's like, oh, hey, we have, $80,000 in the budget or $120,000 in the budget to hire this person. Well, understand that there are cliffs when it comes to like skill set and compensation. So if you go up to 130, maybe, so you have 120 in the budget, but if you go to 130, 135, does that get you an exponentially better candidate? Like, what does the candidate market look like? And so understand that, from your internal HR teams, and then look at budget versus specific roles. Sometimes it's just good to like whiteboard, hey, these are all the things that I need done, as opposed to saying, hey, this person's going to do this person's going to do this person's going to do this. In a large organization, yes, it's going to be more segmented, and you're going to have more pillars, versus a smaller organization. They're going to be like, hey, I just need a bunch of stuff done. This person can actually do these two things. Let's put that together. Let's go over here. And so just have a little bit more flexibility, especially in smaller organizations. Promoting from within, try to find, hey, is there a top performer in the organization? Maybe they're in a different department, and hey, but they're a top performer, and they're going to be quick to learn, and they're sold on our company. That's a really good way. Some of the best marketers, started in either, finance or sales, and they've moved and vice versa, right? Get somebody that's really invested in the company. And then just because somebody is more expensive, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a better candidate for your position. One of the biggest mistakes that I see companies make, especially smaller companies, especially looking for the first marketing hire, they think that they need a CMO, VP of marketing, when really they just need somebody to do a lot of like the blocking and tackling, right? So again, just higher comp doesn't necessarily associate to what you need, okay? So closing with candidates, we'll kind of go through this again. So you can, these are going to be big questions that you're going to want to ask. So talk about compensation early and often. If you, the hiring manager, are not talking about compensation with the candidates, make sure that your HR team is. Okay. Do they have any upcoming bonuses? We're going to get into fourth quarter here, right? Understand, as you hire candidates into fourth quarter, and especially in Q1 of next year, when's their bonus? Is it a yearly bonus payout? When is it? Do they, if the bonus payout is on February 15th and they need to be employed at February 15th, well, you either got to give somebody a pretty nice signing bonus, or you're not going to have an employee until, the beginning of March, or, something like that. Okay. What's the vesting schedule? Upcoming vacations. One of the big things that that I always ask our candidates is, hey, I know you're talking to a number of different companies. Is this your number one opportunity? Okay. 99 times out of 100, if your opportunity is their number one opportunity, they will tell you, oh yes, because again, yes, I'm really interested. When they start to do the, well, they're all very different, and there's good and bad about both, and now they might wanting to just play their cards close to the vest or whatever, but most of the time you're in second place and they just don't want to tell you, right? So just something to be aware of. Have they spoken to their spouse about making a move? Have they, hey, what if, I'm giving you a raise from where you're at now. What if your current company counters and gives you the same? What if they give you $10,000 more? Oh, my current company will never counter. What if they do? Right? So play hypotheticals that way. If they come back to you after they've already accepted the opportunity and say, oh gosh, you know what? My current employer came back and they offered me $10,000 more, and be like, yeah, we talked about this, right? And, now it's on them, right? And then again, another big one is, hey, you know what? I'm trying to put an offer together as soon as possible. If I get you this offer on Monday or Friday or whatever, are you pulling yourself off the market, right? It's a really big one to ask candidates as well. How to choose an external search firm. So again, we just kind of covered, working with internal HR. I'll see if there's any questions up here. Questions aren't, doesn't look like it. Nope. So how to choose an external. So we just kind of covered working with internal HR. If you do have to, go external and choose a search firm, obviously I'm a little bit biased here, but give you some advice on, kind of what to do. Every different search firm, every recruiter has a specific area of expertise, whether it be functional, whether it be industry. Do you work in software? Do you work with marketing positions? Do you work with software but sales positions? Are you an engineering recruiter and you only work for, consumer goods or, whatever? Understand the fee structure, retained, engaged, contingent, guarantee, period. Understand the different fee structures. One of the things that I always say, and I'm, I guess, biased, but a lot of times we'll talk to somebody like, well, we're going to use two firms. It's like, okay. Now I don't do any work now, except if it's, retained and, I'm the only recruiter working on it. But earlier in my career, I did a number of, hey, it's contingent. I'm, working against three other firms. And what ends up happening, what I would end up doing is like, okay, I'm going to go into my database. I'm going to try to get lucky. I'm going to send out, 100, messages or something like that to kind of applicable candidates to see who's going to be interested. So I send out my blast. I get 10 responses. I talk to those 10 candidates. 3 of them I think are really good. I take those 3 candidates, send them over. They kind of go through the interview process. If neither one of those 3 candidates like end up getting the position, I don't do any more work on that role, right? Because then I figure like, oh, well, then these other company or the other recruiting firms, they send over 2-3 people. They send over 2-3 people, and you kind of take one quick swing at it, and then but nobody's really on the hook to fill that position, right? And so what you'll find if you've used kind of contingent in multiple firms in the past, you're like, oh yeah, we got a ton of candidates at the beginning, and then everything kind of fizzled off. It's like, yeah, because they're focused on finding working on some of their other exclusive or engaged or whatever position. So I'm not saying it's the wrong way to do it. Just at least understand and know kind of what goes on behind the scenes in the recruiters' minds. And sometimes working with one firm and saying, hey, XYZ recruiting firm, I'm not working with anybody else, but I need you to know that you're on the hook to fill this role. Like I need you to do that. And that's going to incentivize the recruiter, because they're like, okay, great. Like I'm going to do this because they're only working with me, and I want to make sure that I do a great job for them. Okay. Kind of a long rant, but hopefully it was helpful. Understand their capacity. How many searches are you working on right now? What's your average time to fill a position? What's your sourcing process look like? How many candidates do you have in the database? How do you segment those candidates? And then how do you present candidates to us? This is how we present candidates. And so it's not necessarily, I mean, we don't just send over resumes, right? And so it's like, here's the individual, here's where they live, here's kind of like a summary. We kind of highlight some of their specific skills that are pertaining to the position, and then give you an overview of what we like, what we don't like, what's their compensation, why have they made 2 or 3 changes, and so you just get a really good kind of background context into who the individual is, why they're interested in your position, and maybe what are some red, yellow, or whatever flags that we have about the individual. So quickly, and I know we got just a couple of minutes, so I'll kind of go through this as quick as possible. And don't be afraid, following up, feel free to shoot me a message directly, happy to connect with you around any questions that you might have about the webinar, about the presentation. Sorry, I couldn't, when you're talking about money, I just, sorry, hopefully that's, we're an hour in here, and hopefully everybody got a little bit of a chuckle out of that. So negotiating comp, one of the easiest things, and most people just talk about base salary, which is easy. It's the easiest. That is like, when it's like base is the easiest aspect when it comes to talking about comp. It's kind of like one of those things that we don't even, it's such a given, it's such a layup. That's base salary is normally not what holds up a deal. It's everything else. What's the bonus structure? How often is it paid quarterly? Is it paid yearly? Like, what's the historical bonus payout? How attainable is it? What are the health benefits? What are all the other benefits? Like, base salary is something that, especially like internal, like recruiters and just recruiters in general, like, oh yeah, we got a XYZ base. Okay, well, that's great, but what are all of the other kind of small nuances and just making sure that you're very, very, very buttoned up, on all of those things. So again, base salary is typically the given. It's all of the other, intricacies that if we had more time, I'd probably go into more detail on that. But just know that it's all of the sub questions that are really important that oftentimes don't get asked, that end up hanging up a deal. Okay. Optimizing LinkedIn. I actually took this out just because I knew we were going to be crunched for time. We have other webinars on how to optimize your LinkedIn profile that we can go into, that are resources on the Verseek page. And so if you do have questions about optimizing LinkedIn, again, we can just kind of connect offline, but I did kind of take that out just because I knew we'd be crunched with time. Good resumes versus bad resumes. I always like really formatting information properly. So if you look at like the top third of your resume, think of it like a movie trailer, right? You want to make sure that you have the funny, if it's a comedy, you want to make sure that the funny parts are in the trailer, right? Because that gets people to go to the movie, right? Or watch the movie. Same thing. Make the information as attainable as possible based on the top, third of your resume. Okay, because that's what they're going to look at. The average resume gets looked at for 7 seconds, and I know there's a lot of people, a lot of individuals, and I'm not saying it's terrible, but the one on the right, like I look at that, and it's a lot of words, and I don't kind of know where to start, and I have to kind of read through it, versus the one on the left. It's just the information is much easier to digest. Okay, here's a good example of an executive resume. Kind of just like again, I know there's words on it, but this is, again, if you're an executive, you're kind of, uh, just making sure that you have your short story, areas of expertise. And then what I really like about this resume as well is that you bold a lot of like the performance metrics, that are in there as well. And then skip over that one, and then questions. I know we're up against time right now. We're pretty much like right at 1 hour, right at 10 o'clock Central Time here. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Hope everybody enjoyed the webinar. Sorry if it felt like it was supposed to be very interactive, but again, it was supposed to also be 2 hours. So if you want additional information, feel free to email me, first initial last name at verseek.com. Verseek is, think about versatile and unique, one word, and then my LinkedIn profile, demand gen recruiter. Is what I have. So again, if there's any questions, I'll kind of sit on here for a couple of minutes to have some of your questions. Otherwise, hopefully you enjoyed all of the information, and maybe we'll see you soon.